In this session, we will continue from the previous session. In the last session, we created an index file. We will access the instance through a web browser and take a closer look at how security groups work. First, from the Management Console search bar, type EC2 and move to the EC2 menu, then go to the Instances screen. Select the instance and copy the public IP address. Open a new tab in your web browser and paste the IP into the address bar, then press Enter. You will see that there is no response from the instance. The page does not load, and finally, the connection fails. Why does this happen? To find the problem, let's take a look at the security group. Let's go back to the Management Console. Type VPC in the search bar, right-click, and open the VPC menu in a new tab. On the left, click the Security Groups menu. In the list, here is the security group we created when launching the instance. It should be named VPC01 Public EC2SG. For convenience, let's also enter the name VPC01 Public EC2SG. Select the security group and scroll down to the Inbound Rules tab. As the name suggests, inbound rules control whether incoming traffic to the instance is allowed or denied. Under Inbound Rules, you will see the type, protocol, port, and source. Currently, you can see that only SSH on port 22 is allowed from source 0.0.0.0/0. This means all IPs are allowed to connect through SSH, which means from the outside world internet, we can access this instance through SSH. In a similar way, when we access the web server through a browser, it means we are using the HTTP protocol. And as just explained, security groups control traffic at the instance level based on the type, protocol, port, and source. Now, looking at the current rule, you can see that SSH traffic is allowed. That is why we were able to connect with PuTTY and create the index file. However, HTTP traffic is not allowed, so when we try to connect through the web browser, we cannot access the server and we get an error. So let's fix this by adding an inbound rule to allow HTTP access from the internet. Click Edit Inbound Rules on the right, then click Add Rule. When you click the type field, you will see various options like TCP, UDP, HTTP, and HTTPS. We will choose HTTP. Once HTTP is selected, you will see the protocol is automatically set to TCP and the port is set to 80. For reference, if you select HTTPS, it will set the port to 443, and if you choose MySQL or Aurora, the port will be set to 3306. Select HTTP with port 80 and set the source to 0.0.0.0/0, which means all traffic. For the description, let's type allow HTTP from everywhere in the HTTP rule. Let's also enter allow SSH from everywhere on the SSH rule. And then click Save Rules. Now go back to the security group screen, select the same security group, and look at the inbound rules again. You will see that an HTTP rule has been added with source set to 0.0.0.0/0. Let's return to the web browser tab and refresh the page. This time, the page loads successfully without any errors. And you will see information of this instance, such as the instance ID, the availability zone, the Elastic Network Interface ID, the public and private IP addresses. This information comes from the instance's metadata, which we set up in the advanced options when we created the instance. You will also see primary and secondary Elastic Network Interface details. We will cover network interface in the later session, so we can skip them for now. At first, we could not load the page, but by adding an inbound rule, now we can access the instance and the page can be successfully loaded. And simply, this shows how security groups control traffic based on communication type, protocol, port, and source. So far, we have covered inbound rules. Now let's take a look at outbound rules. Let's go back to the security group screen. With the same group selected, click the Outbound Rules tab. Just like inbound rules, you will see type, protocol, and port. And for outbound traffic, there is a destination instead of source. You will see that this security group allows all traffic with destination set to 0.0.0.0/0. This means all traffic is allowed to go out to any destination, regardless of type, protocol, or port. Let's try a simple test. We will delete this outbound rule and look at what will happen. Click Edit Outbound Rule, delete next to the outbound rule, and then click Save Rules. When you go back to the Outbound Rules tab again, you will see that there are no outbound rules currently set for the security group and only inbound rules remain. Now return to the browser tab we opened and refresh the page. You might expect an error because there is no rule allowing outbound traffic. But as you can see, the page still loads normally without any issue, even though there are no outbound rules. This is due to a special characteristic of security groups called stateful. Security groups are stateful, which means they keep track of active connections. In other words, when an incoming request is allowed, the security group remembers that a connection has been established. Because of this, it automatically allows the response traffic to go out, even if there is no specific outbound rule for it. So you don't need to manually set up a rule for return traffic. The security group handles it for you. Then this might raise a question about when outbound rules are actually needed. Outbound rules can be used to control traffic that starts from the instance itself. For example, if the instance is used as a push server or needs to make outgoing API calls. Let's test this in a simple way. Open PuTTY and connect to the instance. Once connected, type ping google.com and press Enter. In the previous session, since this instance is a public server, you will remember that we were able to communicate with the internet. However, at this time you will see there is no response. That's because this traffic is coming from the instance, and without an outbound rule, the traffic is not allowed to send requests to the internet. Now let's restore the outbound rule and try the same test again. Go back to the security group screen, select the group and go to the Outbound Rules tab, click Edit Outbound Rules. Click Add Rule, select all traffic for the type, protocol, and port will be set to all automatically. Set the destination to anywhere IPv4, then click Save Rules. Back in the Security Group's Outbound tab, you can see the outbound rule has been restored and all traffic is now allowed to go out. Return to PuTTY and try the ping test again. And this time, the communication works successfully. This shows that outbound rules can control traffic generated by the instance itself. And that concludes the session. In this session, we learned how to control traffic at the instance level using security groups. In the next session, we will cover how to control traffic using Network Access Control Lists, also known as NACL.